Well, 2025 has started off with some major fireworks, certainly in the public sector where there's a lot of well-publicized layoffs that are occurring right now. But there's also some things going on in the private sector as well. And in this video, I want to take a look at some of these trends and determine whether or not we should be concerned about the direction of things. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Brian Creeley. I'm a corporate recruiter and HR professional with over 20 years of experience interviewing and hiring thousands of people into some of the world's most well-known and well-respected companies. And I've made it my mission to demystify how hiring and careers work at corporations of all sizes. So if that kind of content interests you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You may also want to hit that notification so you don't miss any future content. And if you found value in this video, those thumbs up really do help push us out to a broader audience, and it helps support the channel. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room and the namesake of this channel, which is layoffs. And certainly 2025 has met with some major developments and fireworks. Now, of course, the most publicized is the Doge, or Department of Government Efficiency, headed by Elon Musk. And they've certainly been living up to their billing. There's been a lot of announcements of major job cuts as a result of this department going in and looking at just about everything under the federal government umbrella. And not surprisingly, a lot of these decisions have been met with criticism, some flack, and probably a sense of panic. But based on some landmark decisions in the court system, it does look like a majority of these layoffs will be indeed moving forward and taking place. And obviously, this is a rapidly evolving story, and I'm going to keep pretty close tabs to it. But there's also some developments going on in the private sector that we should be looking at as well. So in this video, I want to take a look at what's going on with the layoffs and what departments are being hit. And then also, what are some of the companies that are actually announcing layoffs in the private sector? And is it something that we should be concerned about? And then kind of look at the overall job market as a whole and see where we're heading here as we enter into the final weeks of February and the end of the first quarter. So let's head over and take a look at some of the data together. All right, so let's start off with Doge, since there's a ton of things that are going on right now in the White House and in the federal government. And obviously, one of the most well-publicized things was that Trump offered all federal employees the chance to resign with a long severance. And I covered the details of that in another video, but that's the deferred resignation proposal. And so it looks like to date, 75,000 federal employees have accepted this offer. And I think this is actually below what they had hoped for. And Trump had said that he would look to continue to target the number of people if he didn't reach it through these voluntary severances. Next up, we have the probationary employee layoffs. And this is something that is much more common in the federal government, or if you're part of a collective bargaining unit like a labor union, but it's not very common in roles where you're subjected to at-will employment. And if you're not familiar with what at-will employment is, functionally, what it says is that an employer can terminate you for any reason. They don't have to have a specific cause. Same thing for the employee. They can quit the employer without giving a cause or a reason or notice. They can basically just walk off the job, and there's no legal recourse for a company to hold them to that, to being an employee there. But at-will employment doesn't apply to most federal positions, but instead it's through civil service. So you're either part of a collective bargaining unit or you're in what's called the civil service protection, where you have to work for a certain period of time. I think it's usually about a year. And then you would gain this civil service protection, which basically is, it's not a labor union, but it is a protection where an employer can't just terminate you for whatever reason. In other words, it's kind of, once you get past the probationary period, it's pretty sticky. It's kind of, quote unquote, hard to get rid of somebody. And this is why there's something of a reputation of why certain government workers maybe aren't perceived as being as productive, because there's not necessarily that incentive. So functionally speaking, the probationary period is the opportunity for the federal employer to make a move on somebody that they felt was an underperformer, rather than letting them gain this civil service protection. So basically on February 13th, the administration ordered agencies to lay off nearly all workers in probationary status, which is pretty broad and far-reaching, not gonna lie. There are certainly some people in this 220,000 that would be deemed as needed roles, and so this might be pretty broad reaching. But nonetheless, all probationary employees basically have found themselves with a pink slip, and I know there's a lot of news about this, a lot of people kind of in dismay about it. Also in the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have the dismissal of 1,000 employees. We'll talk a little bit more about this department a little later on. But also the Department of Defense has announced that it's cutting 5,400 probationary workers, kind of in line with it. And they anticipate reducing their workforce by between 5 to 8% in the coming term. Department of Education has at least 39 people have been fired in the Department of Education. This is mostly specialists as of right now. And it also looks like there's 169 contracts were terminated on February 10. I would imagine there might be more. I think President Trump has some pretty strong opinions on this department. But if you look down at the Department of Energy, hundreds of federal employees, now this is kind of a little bit of an embarrassing snafu. The Energy Department is who is in charge of the nuclear weapons programs, and a bunch of them were laid off, and then later, like whoopsie daisy, had to be recalled. The terminations were largely rescinded, so that was a bit of an embarrassment. But that, nonetheless, it impacted about 350 employees. So then we get down to the Department of Health and Human Services. There were a lot of probationary employees in this case, more than 5,000 on the line, and also with the Centers for Disease Control, 1,300 probationary employees, about 1/10 of the agency's workforce were scheduled to be affected by this, but it looks like a little over half of them actually were targeted. So there is still some kind of up and down with the numbers here. Department of Homeland Security, we've got 405 people who are identified that were staffers, and it looks like some of them from FEMA. So FEMA has been getting cut. I don't know how many total employees FEMA has, but nonetheless, they've been getting cut. And then we have some infrastructure roles also. It looks like some of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services were let go as well, a few there. And then I know that this is the big one that's kind of making the news or waves right now, is the Internal Revenue Service, where there are thousands of probationary workers in the middle of tax season. If you don't recall, President Biden, or former President Biden, decided to hire, I think it was something like 85,000 additional IRS agents to go and check people's taxes, and some of that has been put on hold, and in fact a lot of those people are now being laid off and I guess redeployed to different parts of different agencies. So this is going to be one to pay attention to, especially during tax time. The National Park Service has fired 1,000 newly hired Park Service employees, which maintain the parks. Which I've seen some TikTok videos of some of the Park Service folks, unfortunately, reacting to that. So, kind of stinks to get your dream job in the Park Service and a few months later not be able to continue there. So it does look like some of the seasonal jobs are going to be reinstated just in time for the tourist season, but nonetheless, that department is being affected. Then we have the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which is effectively going to be shutting down, followed by the Agriculture Department, which it looks like there's about 2,000 non-firefighting employees which are being eliminated. And then foreign aid and development, there's obviously been a lot of talk about this one in the USAID. There's been a lot of people that are being terminated and let go there. And of course, there's Inspector Generals, where Trump had terminated 17 of them, and that was met with some resistance. And then some of the Justice Department and the State Departments also have, basically, there's no department that isn't being looked at right now. And I think you'll probably continue to see more and more people targeted, which unfortunately, if you're somebody that's in the federal government or looking to build a career in civil service, it's not a great time for that. I would just recommend going into something that's mission critical. Obviously, there will still be, the federal government is one of the largest, I think it's the largest employer in the entire country. So there's going to be continued need, and obviously there's churn there, even though people don't typically leave, but there is some churn there. So there will still be jobs, but it's not a great place to be right now until the dust settles, I would say. So let's head over and look at what's going on in the private sector as well, because there's been a lot of layoffs that have been announced over the last couple of weeks, which are a little bit disconcerting. So First, we have BP, British Petroleum, which is slashing 7,700 jobs kind of in response to some cost-cutting measures. Now these aren't necessarily just in the United States. I believe that there's a lot of positions across the globe, but they're cutting 4,700 internal positions and 3,000 contractor jobs. And unfortunately, that looks like that's happening right now. There's also in the energy sector as well, Chevron is laying up to 20% of their global workforce, which the company the size of Chevron, that's a huge number. And you got to kind of wonder what's going on with the energy in the energy segments or sectors. So it doesn't give a total number of how many people, but it's saying that it's to cut costs, simplify business, and complete a major acquisition. So obviously, these companies will go through these after they have big projects they complete. They kind of they evaluate their workforce, and then they kind of redeploy. They re-emphasize resources in different areas, and unfortunately, people do get tapped on the shoulder. Kohl's is also experiencing some difficulties. I think their business model is struggling in general, but they've also announced a 10% cut in the corporate workforce to hopefully boost profitability. I don't know about you, but my local Kohl's does seem like it's struggling. But it doesn't give a total number of people. I'm honestly not sure how many people are working at Kohl's, but I know that they've closed. 27 stores have closed down across the nation, so there's that going on. Then we have Salesforce, which has pretty notoriously embraced AI, and they're laying off over 1,000 workers to make room for more AI-focused roles. So if you're in the technology sector, I would probably double down on my skills in AI to make sure that I don't become redundant in the future. Because I think IBM last year was really pushing for AI focus in their jobs. Now, this doesn't mean that these are jobs that are being replaced by AI, but rather what I'm reading here is that these jobs are being eliminated to make way for their new AI offering, this agent force. So they're looking for people who have a strong background in AI. So I do think that this is an emerging job type that if you're looking to sub-specialize, I think this is probably one that I would certainly double down. I don't think AI is going anywhere anytime soon. There's some talk of an AI bubble, but I think AI is only getting more sophisticated, and certainly would look for anybody's job type. Look for where is AI coming into your sector, into your job type, and figure out how you can start getting in front of those skills and get them on your resume. Of course, the airline sector has been hit very hard over the last few weeks. There's been a rash of kind of strange airplane crashes happening, and Southwest has announced that they are going to be slashing 15% of their corporate workforce. There's been a lot of talk about Southwest. They've gotten a lot of heat over the last few months since their first major layoff in 53 years. So this is, is this a canary in a coal mine as far as air travel is concerned? This is 1,750 jobs, or 15% of their corporate workforce, which is definitely something to keep eye on. And they say it's mostly due to slashing costs and trying to become leaner, faster, and more agile. So read into that how you might. I wonder if they're looking at AI for anything as well, but they are, like I said, they're offering buyouts to airport workers, customer service agents, baggage handlers, cargo workers, in a bid to avoid overstaffing in certain locations. Estee Lauder also has announced a pretty major job cut of 7,000 positions due to a decrease in sales. They're trying to get in front of certain things globally. I think that with the trade, there's some obviously with the taxes and the tariffs and imports on China. A lot of their product is made in China, so there's some question on how that might impact their business. And it says that we are significantly transforming operations to be, again, same thing, leaner, faster, and more agile. It almost is the exact same wording. Now, these are just some of the major ones. There's some other companies that have announced layoffs too. So it got me thinking, are we in an uptick in layoffs? Is this something that we should be concerned about? The first few months, is it due to instability or a question in the job market and the broader economy as a whole? Is there something that we should be concerned about? So I'm obviously not an economist, but I do pay attention to some of the key indicators. So I just wanted to take a quick look at some of the overall numbers. And this article just came out as I make this video just a few days ago, saying that the U.S. labor market is actually stable. The hit from the federal government belt tightening being awaited. Now, what I will say is if you're somebody that is looking for remote work, a lot of these government, I know in the government, the federal government, there was a mandate to return to the office, which is probably catching some people off guard, and they're probably throwing their name in the ring. So if you're unemployed now in the private sector, now you've got this influx of federal job seekers that probably are going to be targeting a lot of those same remote positions. So that might impact some overall numbers in the coming months. But when we look at the tech layoff and tech layoffs in general, I want to look across a longer period of time to see if there's anything that's unusual, at least in the very beginning. And the numbers that I'm actually tracking here are showing actually a pretty positive sign for total number of layoffs as compared to last year. And last year, as you remember, we started off kind of bad, and I talked about that in a video on my kickoff of last year. But we look at the numbers for January, February this year, and they're actually considerably lower than where they were a year ago at this time. Now, obviously, the worst layoffs, we were to compare 2023 to 2024, you even saw the same thing. And so layoffs as compared to 2 years ago in the tech space are considerably lower. And you can see here in this next chart, the tech, this is the tech layoffs since COVID-19. And you can see a considerably lower number than when we saw, let's see, really, it was the second half of 2022 is when we started to see the layoffs. And if we were to look at the first quarter of 2023, you can just see the massive difference in the number of employees. So far, we're way off of those numbers and way off of the numbers in quarter one of, let's just go 2023. We had 167,500 people laid off and over 585 employers. And then when we look at the 1 year later in 2024, 57. So it's more than 100,000 people lower than the year before, and only 156 companies. But so far, now granted we're still in quarter one, so there's still some time here. But so far we're at 13,732, and I think we're probably a little over halfway. So if you were to just even double that to 26, we're still going to be way off the pace of 2020. Let's see. We're still going to be way off the pace of 2024, less than half. So far, everything looks okay in the tech space, the AI revolution notwithstanding, but I'm going to continue to watch this very closely. So then I want to take a look at overall claims, the number of people who are still on unemployment. So this is the economic data is through Fred. You can go and check this out. It's at fredstlouis.org. This is a government website that tracks employment data among other indicators across a lot of different segments, but I pay attention to the labor markets in particular. And as we look over the last, I'd say this is from the peak of the job market in the second quarter of 2022 through today, basically. We are looking at, this is the total number of people who are on long-term claims. So this is people who are not initial. So initial means these are people who are the first claim, they just got laid off. These are people who are continuing to claim week after week. And you can see the numbers really increasing through 2023 up to around, it kind of starts to plateau around 1.8 million in the second quarter, end of second quarter, beginning of third quarter in 2023. And it's remained relatively flat or stable since then. We had a little bit of an uptick in the beginning, the last summer, where it went up just a little bit. But ever since then, there's not really a massive trend in either way. It's just still kind of plodding along. It's like marginally higher, but in general, it's just showing that that number is relatively stable. So the good news is that it's relatively stable. The bad news is it's still way higher than the peak of the job market, where we have some people who are aging in their unemployment benefits. So what about if we looked at initial claims? Because that's going to show us a better snapshot of our layoffs happening across the board more frequently. So this is the same period of time. As we look over in 2022, this is, again, the peak of the job market. You can see how we had a pretty low amount in September of 24, 187,000 new claims. So this is people who just filed for the first time. And you can see over into 2023, other than the COVID spike, this is the second biggest spike that we've seen on record in the last 5 years. And you're looking at over 250,000 new claims each one of these days. So then it kind of into 2024, we went back down again. And over the course of the second half of 2024, we were steadily moving upward. And then heading into the end of the year, we've actually been on a downward trend. And so when we look at the beginning of January through now, it's been relatively stable, somewhere right around 220, 215, 220, somewhere around there. And so the line is it's not a concerning trend up or down. So right now, I don't think that there's any indicators to say that we've got major spike in unemployment. Now, let's see what this chart looks like over the next quarter, because that'll give us a better indicator from all these companies that just announced these layoffs. So still a lot of thinking about this Doge department and these federal layoffs. And we haven't to date seen really that many layoffs in the federal space. It's been pretty much exclusively in the private sector that's been hit really hard over the last few years. And so it's kind of like, why didn't we experience any layoffs back in 2022 and 2023 and even back during the pandemic? And I started thinking to myself, like, well, why is that the case? That basically these employers, the federal government keeps on hiring and hiring and hiring, and there's never anybody exiting unless they retire. So when you start to think pragmatically about just any organization in general, I'm anti-layoff, and I don't wish anybody to be laid off. I've been laid off myself. But generally speaking, I understand why they take place. A company tends to bloat over time. They hire and hire and hire, maybe for specific projects, or their business conditions are great, so they're really trying to aggressively go after certain things. They get to a point where the market changes, and then they have to right size. And so that means they have to cut, like, quote unquote, trim the fat, so to speak. And that's typically where layoffs happen. Certain departments get hit harder than others, high earners, people who they perceive to be not contributing or not moving them in the direction that they want to go to in the future. Recruiters get hit a lot often in these cases. When you're not doing any hiring, you don't need a recruiting team, so they end up getting hit quite a bit. But in the federal government, it's kind of the same. They're basically the same thing. You hire for a specific group or project or team or initiative, and what happens when that team gets funding cut, or a new administration comes in and changes direction? Because with this civil service, there's not really a recourse for these agents or these administrators to basically right size. So essentially, government keeps on growing and growing and growing, and there's never a downsizing or a constricting. And it's interesting to me, because I've worked in the private sector for so long, and to be honest with you, I don't have any experience working directly in the federal government. But I was just thinking to myself, like, it's probably, as much as I don't like, and this is probably going to be unpopular to say, but it's probably not realistic to never have layoffs and right sizing in the public sector. And so if you look at the number of employees across, this is in the United States, these are the biggest employers. Walmart currently has 2.1 million, followed by Amazon at 1.5 million. And you kind of go down through the list and you can see the other biggest employers. These are like some really big, these are huge employee populations. But when you go over and start looking at the size of the federal government actually has 2 million plus employees working for it. And actually, you saw a huge jump up from 2022 to 2023 of 4.1%, which is considerable growth given that size of government. And even with it was for a normal private company, that would be a major hiring event to get that many people in. And kind of looking at the trends along how many people are there versus exiting, you're not really seeing a lot of people exiting, because there's never any layoffs. But when you start looking at the top agencies per agency employers, in other words, who's the biggest employer inside of the federal government, and one of them was the Veteran Affairs, which is which is crazy because if you look at it, the number of people who work in Veterans Affairs, which runs the VA, runs the benefits programs, etc., in the Veterans Affairs office, it has a staggering 400,000 employees, which if you kind of look at by size, it's the same size as Target, as Kroger, as Marriott, as Berkshire Hathaway. It's bigger than Starbucks and like Costco, PepsiCo, TJ Maxx companies. It's a bigger entity than these companies are the same size. And to me, it's crazy that one department has that many people. And if you think about like the standing, the military, I don't know how many is in the military. I think it's something like I'm going to say 1.5 million. I could be completely wrong, but I'm going to say it's like 1.5 in the active military. Now, no, obviously the VA covers people who have transitioned out, so there's a lot more people than that. But when you look at the total number of active workers, I'm just using the VA for an example, that's a staggering number of people to the actual military. Now, I don't know how many people are currently enjoying the VA benefits and go through them, so I'm not discounting the need for it. The numbers were surprising to me. Another thing that I was kind of curious about is going back and looking at the agency overall. Just this one agency, because there's the biggest one. I just was curious. In fiscal year, their budget was $112 billion appropriated. So that was in fiscal year 2022. They asked for in 2023, I didn't confirm whether or not they received it, but they asked for in fiscal 2023 $3.14 billion. So that's almost triple the budget in 1 year. I just think, and again, I'm not saying that it's not needed or any of that kind of stuff. I have no idea, but that just seems crazy to me. If you look at it from like putting on your public or your private cap, your private company cap versus public, the number of employees plus the budgeting. Now, obviously, these are not profit centers. We know that. These are government entities who are providing services. But the number there is just staggering. Now, I know this is a lot of heavy information to take in, especially if you're on the receiving end of a layoff or there's some uncertainty in your industry or your job type. So if you're somebody that's really struggling and worried about how to navigate through it, it's actually something that I specialize in. I've got a website called alifeafterlayoff.com, which is loaded with insider tips and tricks. And I share my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of some training courses, which are designed to give you power back in your career and also approach the job search process with conviction and authority. I cover everything from career strategy to resume writing, LinkedIn networking, and then also how to approach your job search and your interviewing with more conviction and authority. So if you're interested in any of those tools, go and check out my website for that. I also offer some limited private one-on-one coaching where you can reach me through my website in order to get signed up. Anyway, I'm going to keep tabs on what's going on in the job market, so make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to follow along for more. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.